So I'm Amy Leigh Bird and I'm really excited to be a part of this exhibition, this place where I stand with both Sean and Simon. This piece in particular is called Bleak Beauty, and it was inspired by one of my favourite artists, Cornelia Parker. She did this beautiful piece called Cold Dark Matter, an exploding view, and it's where she has taken very mundane, ordinary objects and elevated them into this sort of hanging sculpture piece. And it gives the viewer an opportunity to look at objects in a different way. And I think when it came to making this piece, that is also what I wanted to do. I wanted to mirror that in the sense that I wanted to give these very almost repulsive to a lot of people and disregarded items a space to be at eye level, somewhere where you could really appreciate not them just for their beauty, but for the fact that they were once sort of living, sentient beings. So this piece is called Traces, and the way that I made it is by taking a huge sheet of cotton canvas and tying it to the steps outside my studio, which leads onto the river. And it was in the river for just under 3 months, and I think the concept and the reasoning behind why I did that is because as a printmaker, I'm quite particular, and the whole process is very controlled and calculated, and sometimes that can be a little bit exhausting as a creative. And I think giving yourself the ability to let the mark making happen on its own accord can be really fun and really rewarding. And obviously I've been making work that has been about items in the river and objects that I've collected, and I thought of using everything physical but the water. And so for this piece it was really an opportunity to see how the river would mark the canvas itself. This piece was made in the build-up to the Christmas period, and then after. I actually collected it out of the water just before the show started, which was originally in January. And actually, the mark here, the tear, wasn't intentional. When I collected the canvas itself, it was all in one piece, but where it had been in the water for so long, it had become incredibly fragile. And when I tried stretching it, every time I pulled the canvas, it tore. And at the time, I found that incredibly frustrating. But yet again, this was an element of the whole process being taken out of my hands. I couldn't actually help. I couldn't change the fact that it was tearing. And in the end, I just decided to rock and roll with it, which I'm really glad I did, because I think it adds to the piece rather than it just being a plain canvas. This piece in particular is called A Walk Along the Foreshore, and the reason I have a kind of special affinity with this piece is because it's actually one of the first bones that I collected on the foreshore when I was down there. I think there was a sort of a period of time before I started making this collection of work where I was spending a lot of time walking at low tide and noticing the the sheer mass and amount of bones that I was seeing. But this was the first one that I could really identify, and I knew what it was. I could tell it was a hoof. And then it really made me think back. It kind of threw me back in time to when horses and donkeys, would have been a more regular occurrence within the city. This piece is called Ancient Ruins, and it is a spherical orb of mostly a lot of the smaller bones that I've hand collected from the foreshore. And one of the things I personally love most about making this piece is how effortlessly the bones all slot together, even though they are completely different shapes and sizes. And at the time at which I was making this piece, I was reading into the Fibonacci sequence and kind of reading into how patterns naturally occur within nature. For me, when I'm walking along the foreshore, my mind starts going crazy. I can get very creative and I start visualizing pieces in my head. And for me, this piece I had going on in my head before I even started putting it together. We are surrounded by a kaleidoscope of visual patterns, both living and dead, and I think this piece really encapsulates that idea for me.